Welcome to the Old Goalies Podcast, a Delusion.Group podcast. The Old Goalies Podcast is brought to you by listeners and viewers like you. Please go find the Delusion.Group supporters page on Patreon. Please give a like or a 5-star review on your favorite podcast service to help out the Old Goalies to be heard by more listeners. Music for the show is provided by the Floodgate Operators. You can find their music on Apple Music or on Spotify. As always, Old Goalies is not intended for goalkeepers under the age of 17.
There's blood on the tracks.
This episode was recorded on April 28th, 2024. We've had some changes here at the show, so we're excited to bring some new things to you. You can see in the upper corner, we've got a new logo for the Old Goalies Podcast. You're going to see some branding changes throughout all of our social media and our website. We are super excited to make a move to Patreon as well, so the show can be supported by you, the listener and viewer. We'll have information about that during the episode. Want to make sure that we say thank you to everyone who's been listening for the 3 seasons that we've had the Old Goalies. We're super excited to move forward and continue to give you some great stories throughout the history of soccer in the United States. And thank you again for listening to the Old Goalies Podcast. The next time you see me, I'll have more facial hair on the other side. Figure that one out. It happens. We wanted to take a moment to thank John Boa for all the years that he's been with the Old Goalies through almost a full 3 seasons with us. He has moved on to bigger and better things. We're super excited for him and wish him nothing but the best. This episode with Kevin Hartman actually brings in a brand new co-host for us, Pat Johnston, who's been on the show a number of times, so should need no introduction. But we're excited to have Pat on board. And without further ado, we're going to send you over to Pat and Bone for the interview with Kevin Hartman with the LA Galaxy.
Super. So Pat, I just want to share some things about Kevin. 17 years in the MLS. What a career. What a career. It was over, 10 years with the LA Galaxy.
First year? Was he a first year? Were you in the inaugural season?
No, I was finishing up at UCLA, actually.
Okay. He started in 97, 1990. And then went to the Kansas City Wizards, who are now sporting, KC. Was with them for a few years, traded to FC Dallas, and then retired with the New York Red Bulls. But Pat, this guy holds so many MLS records. It's amazing.
Nice.
First, he was voted as one of the 25 greatest players in the MLS. I mean, yeah, right. I mean, what do you say to that, Pat? Right off the bat, kaboom! Incredible. 5-time MLS Cup finalist. 5-time. He's won it twice. 3-time MLS Supporter Shields winner. Like I mentioned, 2-time MLS Cup.
I feel like you guys should do this before I get on, so I don't have to feel awkward.
The big one, Kevin, that everyone on the show likes is Pat, a 2-time U.S. Open Cup winner. And if you follow the show, we always talk about that. And so I'm sure he's got some good stories about that. Pat, you're not going to believe some of these numbers as far as appearances and things like that. 416 games started. Minutes played over 37,000. MLS leader in games played with 146, like I said. First goalkeeper to win 100 shutouts. Most playoff games and starts. Most played playoff keeper wins. He's had 24 keeper playoff wins. 15 were shutouts, Pat. Pretty amazing.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
And I think it's going to be interesting to hear the pipeline. So he's born, of all places, Athens, Ohio. Grew up, went to high school in Radford, Virginia, played there for a couple years, and then went out to California. Everyone thinks, he just went to UCLA when he got there, and I'm going to let him talk about that journey because it's really interesting. His first year, he redshirts at UCLA. So, Kevin, take us away here. The journey from Athens, Radford, California, and how you eventually got to UCLA.
Yeah. Well, first of all, I appreciate hearing all those numbers and stuff. It's amazing when you're playing. You're really just trying to go from week to week and make sure that things around the house and your quality of life is good. And so you try to win on the weekend. And before you know it, your career's over. And sometimes it takes some digging to really actually remember how all those wins kind of fit together. And I tend to think about things more as experiences with the friends that I had on the team and the coaches that I had more than some of the awards and stuff. But it's certainly humbling. And I love the game. I felt really lucky to be able to do something I loved for a really long time. Was extremely passionate about it. I'm still passionate about the sport, and feel really lucky that I was able to kind of keep it going as long as I have. Yeah, like you said, I was born in Athens, Ohio. My dad was working at Ohio University at the time. And he eventually took a job at Radford University as the vice president of student affairs. And so we moved there when I think I was 4 years old. So my recollection of Ohio is not too robust. My grandparents and my uncle lived in Newark, Ohio, which is where my father grew up. So I kind of have more memories of that from the holidays, etc. But eventually, moved out to California for another opportunity. But my time in Virginia was an important time. It was baseball, football, basketball country, not a lot of soccer at all. I spent a lot of time with a wall and a ball and just worked on my techniques and went to Dr. Macknick's #1 goalkeeping camp for a long time. They'd come to Lexington, Virginia, and I'd go up to Washington and Lee. And I think I went maybe when I was 12 or 13. But as soon as I was a part of that, I knew that's what I wanted to do with my life. And I decided I wanted to be a professional goalkeeper. Certainly was not in the epicenter of soccer development down in Radford. And so I was really upset that I had to leave Radford. There's a lot of great people that I met. We played co-ed high school soccer. I developed a massive respect for women in the game through that experience, and moved out to California. And really the only parameters that I kind of set in place at that point, if any 16-year-old can actually do that, was that I wanted to go somewhere that I could play high-level soccer. And fortunately, my dad got a job at Cal State Dominguez Hills. And Palos Verdes High School was right around the corner. They were the Southern Section champions of California. And so I felt like I was going to go in there and I was going to have some experiences. They were going to be really impressed with with what my level was like. And, I think all my teams in Radford, we were losers pretty much. So, but I got a ton of shots. I got 30, 40 shots a game, and I'd end up making the paper for having a new record number of saves, but we lost 4-0 or something. So I was getting shelled. And like I said, when I moved out to California, I was playing JV soccer. The coach's son was the senior goalkeeper, and I wasn't probably going to, throw him off of his throne as the starter. So I just, took the opportunity to start piecing together what the tactics of the game look, how I was going to implement my techniques, that I kind of took a lot of pride into actual gameplay. So I felt really fortunate the way that evolved.
So you were 16 when you moved.
Exactly. Yeah.
Did you play any other sports in Radford besides soccer? And at what point did you say, I'm going for goalkeeping?
Yeah, I think, like I said, as soon as I was 12 or 13, like soccer was going to be my thing. But I think at that time, and it's interesting because I've spent some time in youth development, and I feel like one of the greatest things about, having a high school season and having a club season was that there was two ends and two beginnings. And so I had the opportunity to take some lessons away from the club season and work on those over, maybe Christmas break. And then we had to enter a new season, and that ability to start anew and with a clean slate, I thought was advantageous for me.
Right.
And then, May comes around, June comes around, and it's summertime. I have a camp window that I would work within. And so I found something that really kind of worked for me. But in regards to other sports, yeah, I played a little bit of basketball up until 8th grade, played a little bit of baseball, a little bit of football, but I didn't really grow until my 9th or 10th grade year. So 8th grade football was going to be a lot. JV football was going to be a lot. And so at that point, I just kind of took a step back, ran indoor track and played golf. So I feel like I was a multi-sport athlete. But
so actually, I
soccer was my thing.
Because Greg and I are dinosaurs. We played in the day when you could play the ball back and we could pick it up. So you were in your formative years when the back pass rule changed, right? Was that like 92, 93, something like that, 91? So did you now become more inclined to, did the training change a bit, field player wise? How old were you when the rule change kicked in?
Yeah, I believe it was, I think it was at 90 or 92. It was one of those. Either I was in high school or I was just wrapping up high school. And the reality is that I felt like I was spending so much time on the defensive aspects of goalkeeping. It was hard for me to even comprehend that I was going to have enough time to become a field player at that point. And I still wonder, what you're losing, by dedicating different amounts of times in different arenas, because I know what you can accomplish if you dedicate every second of every day to the defensive side of it, but I think it's an interesting dilemma to try to integrate or implement all these other portions of the training so that you can also become a field player. But yeah, I struggled with it, to be frank. I think when I finally in 97, when I was playing professionally and maybe a little bit at UCLA, I was playing more and more soccer, tennis. I was, just trying to figure out different ways to be more competent with my feet and being able to take good preparation touches and controls, and feel at least confident enough that I was able to hit some balls over a range of different distances and clear effectively.
Yeah, let's talk about how you got to UCLA. You mentioned your father taking a job in the California State University system. People forget you started out Division II, and then what happened? How did you get to UCLA? Because you had one of the I think one of the most important coaches we've had in the U.S. was Ziggy Schmidt as the head coach, and you elected to redshirt your first year. So share with us that little journey.
Yeah, so like I said, when I moved out to California, it was obviously pretty tumultuous. I was playing JV soccer as a junior. I had these aspirations to play professionally. I can't even get on the field, on the varsity team. So my senior year, I split time with the goalkeeper that eventually ended up at Notre Dame. And I don't know how long he played there, but he wasn't a significant contributor within that program. But I finished up my senior year, and I think I'd had my favorite experience as a soccer player was probably playing in Dallas Cup. We played in the Super Group, got to play against Taiwichi, and I felt like I was going to be able to parlay some of that momentum into college. But hadn't really spent a lot of time. I think maybe I talked to the coach at Coastal Carolina a little bit, talked to the coach at Chico a little bit, but eventually I wasn't prepared to make a gigantic move based on, the opportunities that had been offered. And so I decided, just based on my relationship with the the coach at Cal State Dominguez Hills named Maureen Cano. Maureen Cano had played goalkeeper for the LA Lasers. And was somebody that I felt would be able to positively affect my career in the long term. So I went there. I was going to redshirt, had the opportunity to start immediately. And so I had to make a decision whether I wanted to use a year of eligibility. I proceeded to do that and played 2 years at Cal State Dominguez Hills and really loved every second of it. It was a great stepping stone for me. But I always knew that I wanted to play Division I. I knew I was going to have to make a move. And I think after my sophomore year, Maureen Cano was going to go down and take the opportunity down at UC Irvine as their director of soccer. And I'd been playing on Thursday nights with an adult team, Doxa Italia, the Exiles, some great players that played for this group. And I would go out. I was just blown away how professionally that this group took things. And what eventually happened was the goalkeeper that was playing there was the goalkeeper coach at UCLA. So he was like, well, you should at least throw your hat in at UCLA. And so I did so. Went on a tour and eventually was able to go as a walk-on to UCLA, and the level was certainly as high as it was anywhere in the U.S. at that point. And you know, I was competing against Chris Snitko, who was the Olympic team goalkeeper and had been there just after Brad Friedel. Ended up playing at the Kansas City Wizards, and Matt Reese was maybe 2 years back. So by redshirting a year, it kind of provided a little bit of spacing. I think that was a little bit, it allowed me to play my senior year, which I could parlay into an opportunity within MLS.
So Kevin, Maureen Kano actually played in the NASL with the Fort Lauderdale Strikers as an 18-year-old. And I remember that because I grew up in South Florida, and he had the nickname Kip Kano. Marine Kip Kano is what they called him. And I saw this guy. So, Greg, imagine, like, you remember this, like my guys were Arnie Mauser and Kip Kano comes along, and I see him at a ID camp. He coaches women. I think, has he coached women the whole time, I believe? Kevin, for a long time, right?
He definitely won a lot of national championships with the Cal State Dominguez Hills team back in the early 90s, I think. Yeah. Fantastic women's coach.
Yeah. And I saw him, and it was like, I mean, this was only like 2 years ago. I'm 60 years old now. So I said, Kip Kano, you were my hero when I was a kid, man. he's like, somebody actually remembers, Good guy. Seemed like a real good guy.
That's a funny story.
Yeah, he's down in Birmingham now, I think. I think he just recently moved down that direction. But yeah, he is, we all called him Butch around here. But he's got, you should bring him on sometime, because that is an old goalie. And he's got some serious stories. He went over to England for a while, playing in some lower tier teams, and people throwing stuff at him. He definitely is somebody that not only is a resource for all the expertise he has, but somebody that has had some unbelievable experiences in U.S. soccer at a time when it wasn't necessarily easy to find a living within it, and he did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Pat, I think people forget the following of UCLA keepers. David Vanoli. Brad Friedel, we mentioned. Matt Reese. Obviously, Kevin Hartman. Nick Raimondo. I mean, the list right there, right? That's pretty intimidating.
Yes.
Some phenomenal names right there. Kevin, when you were going to walk on, what were you thinking about? Okay, hey, I'm going to go be playing for Ziggy Schmidt. I mean, this is a legend. I mean, what am I getting myself into?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, at that point, I think I'd watch maybe the '90 championship between Rutgers and UCLA on TV. I watched, obviously, when I was in Radford, I'd watch Tony Meola and UVA, and I just knew that we're talking about the upper echelon of college soccer, and at that point, it was U.S. soccer in general. That was kind of the apex of it. And so I knew I was getting myself into something serious for sure. And Siggy was somebody that was a South Bay legend, but he was also somebody that had a great reputation within U.S. soccer. Somebody that came from a German background, and he was intimidating for sure, but he also had a massive heart. He'd be willing to do anything for anybody, and so. I just remember how difficult it was to get a compliment from Siggy. But once you received one, that you knew that you had reached a standard that was not a standard that you got cheap compliments to be playing at. And so it was a special time for me. I had the opportunity to compete with guys who were regularly on the Olympic team. Greg Vanny was my roommate at that point, and he had gone on to play at the LA Galaxy. Frankie Hayduk was on that team. Ante Razov was on that team. Eddie Lewis was on that team. It was a really, really special time to be able to see how other people prepared themselves. And for me, like I had always had a growth mindset. And so I knew that redshirting a year was just going to be, an extension of my college playing career, but it was going to be a time when I would be able to kind of, figure out the things that I could continue to improve upon and dedicate time to that and figure out, how I could make my strengths even bigger and compete at this higher level.
Yeah, in 1997 in the college draft, the MLS college draft down in Florida, you're the 29th player picked. Were you surprised that you were the third keeper in that, or were you just like happy as hell to get drafted?
Hey, funny story. So we ended up playing Cal State Fullerton, and Cal State Fullerton at that time was like a huge rival of ours. And I think we were ranked number 1 in the nation the entire year. And for some reason, maybe they could sell more tickets or whatever, but they got the home game in the first round. And so we crashed out of the playoffs a lot earlier than expected. And I thought I'd had a decent year, and I'd gotten a little bit of time my junior year because Chris Nitko had gone down with an injury. But I think it popped up that I had maybe, I'm trying to think how this happened. Maybe Peter Miller had like a goalkeeper camp down in Fort Lauderdale. And so I paid my own way, flew down to Fort Lauderdale, participated in this combine, and got on the plane and flew home. And it just so happened that the draft was while I was on my flight back. And so I got off the plane and my parents told me that I'd been drafted. I didn't really remotely care what number it was, but I was happy that I was going to be able to stay in Los Angeles and, apply my trade there at least for 3 months until Jorge Campos came back from Mexico.
Yeah, I was going to ask you trivia. Do you remember the two keepers who got picked in front of you? Of course, we do, but I'm wondering if you remember.
I have no clue. Somebody from William and Mary?
No, that is incorrect.
Okay.
The number 1 keeper was Scott Kofel from IU, got picked by New England. And then Tom Prestis from SMU.
DC United.
Yeah, he had a pretty extensive.
Where did he play in college?
SMU.
SMU. Huh.
Yeah. So little trivia.
Well, they both ended up having great careers too.
Yeah. Obviously, Tom was a little bit longer than Scott, but nevertheless. Pat, a little trivia here. The 26th pick was a Cincinnati kid, if you can believe it. Picked by New England, local high school guy, played at Northern Kentucky University, named J.T. Roberts. How about that, Pat? And pretty incredible as you dig into this. And Ryan's got some information about how New England, chime in here, Ryan, about how New England didn't even have a pick, right?
You're on mute, Brian.
Yeah. Go ahead, Brian. You were on mute.
There we go. We're good.
There we
go.
Yeah, we're good. Yeah, we're good.
I'm feeling it tonight. You can tell I've been out on the fields for the last 2 days. So New England did not have a pick in the first round of that draft. Kind of a cool reason why, though. They traded their first pick, which was the second pick overall, to the Tampa Bay Mutiny in order to sign Thomas Rongen as their head coach. And Thomas has been on the show.
Yeah, a little trivia there. Interesting.
Thomas Rongen.
Yeah. So, Kevin, you mentioned, your first year you sat behind the Mexican keeper, Jorge Campos. What was the training like with him? Did you know who he was before? Was he serious at training, or, who could care less? He was obviously one of the keepers who could play with his feet very, very well at that point, but certainly on the smaller side, very cat reflexes. What was, some of your memories training with him?
I think the biggest thing for me was, Jorge was somebody that understood the game extremely well. Played obviously the last 20 minutes of almost every game up top as a striker. But it was interesting to see how he would translate that into the way that he played goalkeeper. Just for example, I think there'd be times where the ball would get crossed into the 18 and maybe there's only one striker in the box and he would just go stand on the striker and he would literally just leave the goal totally unoccupied. And if the ball was over the striker's head, then he would let it roll kind of innocently out the far sideline. And I think there's a lot of times where goalkeepers will get themselves kind of into predicaments by not necessarily knowing all of the things that are going on around him. So maybe they don't have all the information, and so they put themselves into a challenge with the striker where he's not going to be able to head it, but the goalkeeper is able to box it down to somebody that's unmarked at the top of the 18. And I just felt like he had such a great understanding of everything that was going on the field. And he was athletic as could be. He wasn't necessarily somebody that would train hard. He would usually sit on a soccer ball and cheer me on and ask me if I wanted to go on a ride in his Ferrari. But he was a good person. He loves golf. And he has had some huge moments as a goalkeeper. But he was an entertainer, and he recognized that he was able to do that and keep people happy. He dedicated a lot of time to the fans and trying to entertain them. And, I think sometimes he put his defenders in the lurch a little bit with some of his distribution. But he was also somebody that had the capacity to come up with a big save. And I've always respected Jorge as somebody that was extremely competent with their feet, and he was a good human and willing to share.
Was he 5'8"? Was that his height?
I don't know how tall he was, but he certainly has a vertical jump. Ryan, you're on mute again, dude.
5'6", according to historical records.
5'6".
Historical records. They measured his skeleton. He's not even dead yet.
I'm just saying, they got it out there. Usually they lie on everybody's media guide stuff, but I'm pretty sure his is accurate.
I don't know. 5'6" sounds pretty small.
Well, Kevin would know better than any of us. He's right there.
It wouldn't surprise me if he had a 40-inch vertical jump, by the way.
Oh, wow.
I remember one highlight where you were talking about the situational awareness of him, where there was a ball coming in the box, and he darted in front of the forward. It was a bouncing ball, and he flipped it over him with his hand right in front of the goal, but he knew nobody else was there.
Mm-hmm.
And so the forward now is out of the play, and he just jogs over and picks it up. And I'm thinking, what a cool cat this guy is, man.
It's true. It's true, PJ. I was blown away by the fact he would deflect it into a space where nobody else would be. He was just cool like a cucumber. You're right, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, after the season, you're the third pick in the expansion draft by the Chicago Fire, but then the Galaxy reacquire you in a trade by trading Jorge and Chris Armas for you and Danny Pena. Tell us what the heck was going on with that whole scenario back then.
It just seems like for me, it was almost like a lesson in the business of soccer. So you have these 10 expansion picks, or 10 picks that you can protect, 10 players you can protect. I think they made LA protect Campos because he was at that point, a pseudo DP. And then I think Chicago realized that if they picked me up, LA didn't even have a goalkeeper until June. And so it was just an opportunity to use as a bargaining chip. And certainly I told Bob that I wasn't very appreciative of him playing with my family and I's lives. But, it's part of the game, especially, at that point within the league. And so, yeah, they picked me up. Bob called me and he was kind of like, we rate you as a goalkeeper. We've got Zach Thornton. We rate him. We feel like we're sitting pretty here, but LA's in a little bit of a bind. And so, we'll see how things play out over the next number of months. And eventually, Chicago was able to get Jorge Campos and it was Jorge Campos and Chris Armas, eventually go to, which is two people that LA had originally protected, to get back two players that maybe hadn't been protected. So it was chaos in the Hartman household, and certainly made things difficult on me, that whatever it was, November, December, and January.
Yeah. Now, a lot of times we talk about fate, and obviously the next thing we're going to get into certainly sums it up with you. 2006 is your last year with Galaxy, and 2007, David Beckham gets signed with the team. You're in Kansas City. What were your thoughts for, at that particular time? Like, oh my God, this is going to blow up the league. Damn it. I missed it by a year. What was going on in your head at this point?
Yeah, obviously, I was fortunate to have been able to play at my hometown club for 10 years, and even when I was a senior in college, I'd been able to kind of follow along pretty closely because my roommate was playing for the club. So I felt like I was a Galaxy guy through and through. I think Alexi was the GM at that point. Frank Yallop was the head coach, and Frank Yallop obviously had a great relationship with Joe Cannon, brought Joe in, and it was pretty obvious that there wasn't going to be enough room for myself and Joe Cannon on the roster. They had a new blonde coming to town in David Beckham, and so at that point they figured they could get rid of the other good-looking blonde in LA, and I had to go to Kansas City. So, that's just the way that it happens sometimes. And I got to play on an Arrowhead, and I got to play on a baseball field out there in Kansas City. So fun times for sure. But David did unbelievable things for the league, and it was a great timing for the league, and certainly I think LA did a great job of over the time that he was there of building something really special. I thought Landon and that group and eventually Robbie, and they did won some unbelievable championships during that time, and really I think kind of changed what the landscape was for soccer within the United States.
So you're in the ML. You're with the Galaxy that 10 years, early days of MLS still, really. And so what was the celebrity treatment like for you? Like probably the LA Galaxy's like C-list or whatever, or were you A-list? How were you guys treated?
Yeah, we were still flying commercial, that's for sure.
Okay.
But, I think that there were people that were appreciative of it. I think the demographic is obviously evolved. Our parents' generation didn't necessarily grow up with the game, and so it certainly, from a generational perspective, wasn't as important to them. But for me, all my friends grew up playing, and so I think when I was at UCLA, there was a mutual respect between the football players, the basketball players, and the soccer players. Like I think we all realized what it took to be successful, and we all had different arenas that we were doing it in, and I think that within Los Angeles and the United States, I think that people that were in the know respected what it was that we were trying to do, and respected how difficult it was to play at that level. And I think that there was probably also some wonderment when they found out what exactly we were making as athletes playing at the professional level.
Yeah. I get it.
You mentioned Frank Yallop. You also played for some other, pretty good coaches, besides Ziggy and Steve Sampson and Shellis Hyndman. What are some of your memories in playing for both of those gentlemen?
The longer that you play professionally, the more that you understand, where strengths lie within different coaches. And all of these guys have unbelievable attributes that allow them to get the respect of the people within the locker room. And they also know, how to surround themselves with people that kind of fill in the gaps. And, I thought that Steve was somebody that, could certainly maneuver himself around the soccer field, but he was also somebody that was able to have dynamic conversations. He presented well within the media. And Schellis was somebody that, was a soccer guy through and through, a tactician, somebody that understood, from his days of being a karate master, just about discipline and what it took to be good teammates and provided excellent resources for the teams. And so, yeah, I mean, both of them were great people. It's hard to last very long in the business if you don't have a heart. And I really like both of the gentlemen that you mentioned, and certainly have been fortunate to play for some unbelievable coaches.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit more about that. Good segue here. Obviously you've done your own camps. You instruct young kids. It's very gratifying, especially being a mentor to some of these kids. Growing up, who was some of your mentors? A name that comes up a lot when we talk about Kevin Hartman is Zach Abelua. Tell us a little bit about Abel. Yeah, thank you. Talk to us a little bit about him and how you met him and your relationship with him.
Yeah, Zach Abel was somebody that I believe I started working with in 1997 when Octavio came on board. And it was interesting because I told you a little bit about the game versus Cal State Fullerton, and Zach had actually been the goalkeeper coach for the Titans when they beat us in my final collegiate outing. And so even from that point, our lives are somewhat intertwined. And when he came to work for the Galaxy, it was a different level of physical training than I've ever had in my life. But it wasn't just that. I mean, he had unique techniques that weren't really commonplace. I don't think, from a lot of perspectives.
Like what, Kev? What would be one?
I think at this point he's probably I'm 23, 24 years old, and I imagine a majority of the time that I was diving, I'd kind of grown up, diving for high balls to the corner using my top hand, and he was like, "We're going to make your legs so strong that you're going to use the hand that's closest to the ball," and so we were working on plyometrics and dialing that in, and eventually, from a reactionary standpoint, I was 8 feet into the air using my bottom hand, and it wasn't really a problem. And I didn't have to pull my hand up from the far side of my body to get to things that were on this side, So that would be one example. His different boxing techniques, protecting spaces, was unique, but he just, you worked, and if you didn't work, you weren't ever going to play. And I would say that our warm up was probably more difficult than some of the pressure training that I'd been a part of in my life. So I was literally as fit probably as I've ever been. But he pushed you. Yeah, I mean, he pushed you. He was there to support you. He would stand up for you in the room when the coaches were around, and then he would lambast you in private, and then he'd put his arm around you, and he'd offer the resources necessary for you to continue to improve. But, excellent at evaluating the game, excellent at giving feedback, but it was no nonsense for sure.
That's how Evie was, Greg. He, when Rennie would give me grief, he'd get him, but then he would, give me a bollocking outside of that type of thing.
Right.
Really, like a keeper's keeper, Kevin, do you teach top hand now, or do you teach? What do you teach?
I would teach top hand now if the ball's coming back across you, but I wouldn't teach it if it's. I don't know. I think it's a variety of both of them, to be honest.
Right. Yeah, I do too. That's interesting, Pat. I'm a big top hand person, but that's because that's how I was taught with the German technique. But Kevin brings up a point. If you're able to concentrate on plyometrics, which is just, such explosion that you can do what he explained, that might also work as well. But a lot of times, in my opinion, the youth keepers don't have that type of explosion.
It is certainly something that, would be from an athletic standpoint, not necessarily something that every person's going to be able to do. It's based on kind of the elite decisions or elite athletes and kind of what they're able to kind of pull off.
Yeah, fair enough. To me, reactionary save is bottom hand. Always, where you just don't have time to get a step in. And then other than that, I try to incorporate the top hand because if you're able to throw your power step, then you should be able to throw the hand. But as you said, it's that decision process of recognizing. But anyway,
the other side of it is for me is if I have a ball that's coming this way, and I look towards the flight of the ball, I'm matching these two things up, right? Mm-hmm. And if I'm pulling something that's from out of the frame of my body across and maybe interfering with my sight line, it could also be an issue. So, yeah, I think it's a dynamic conversation. I've spent a lot of time thinking about it. I don't necessarily think that there's a perfect answer and an answer that's going to be right on every occasion, but I do feel like I talk a lot about the bottom hand, but being able to plyometrically get myself there. But if it comes back and knuckles on me up above my head, I would have that to kind of be able to tuck things away. So yeah, it's fun to talk about this stuff. I actually have one of the interns that I work with on a regular occasion is somebody that really understands how the body works and how it can be most efficient. And so it's been interesting to talk a little bit about set position from 6 yards versus set position from 12 yards versus 18, understanding foot saves and how those work, because foot saves weren't necessarily something that, the old school group is going to be able to say, oh yeah, I totally understand that, because you probably don't. And I'm not sure I do all the time, but I want to learn more and I want to continue to evolve because I certainly feel like the game is moving, and if you're not willing to move, then it's going to pass you by.
You've had quite the career, so mine was only 6-7 years and of I burned and I was done type of thing. But I can still think back on things, and so this is something I wanted to ask you. Where you made saves, I'm sure that you were like, I never trained that before. That's for sure. Just shit you would pull off that you would turn around and say, well, there was no other way I could do it. It's like your instinct will kick in to do what needs to be done for a goalkeeper at your level. I got to think that's something that was not uncommon.
Yeah, I mean, it just becomes instinctual, right? And at the end of the day, it's what people say. It's like, your job is to keep the ball out of the goal, and
that's it.
Yep. Sometimes you're just laying yourself out there and putting it all on the line. And there's certainly been enough times where I've been kind of carted off the field after taking something in the trachea or in the face or whatever the case may be. I mean, it's instinctual, and it's part of who you are, right? I mean, you're an alien. You're a freak of nature. You're standing there. This guy's smashing the ball at you from 4 yards away, and you're like, how can I get in the way of this ball? And that's not natural, man. So
that's indoor.
Sometimes you're an animal, and things just take over.
That's the indoor way. Ask Greg. So yeah, when did so this was again part of the evolution of the position where you're in your heyday. Is the spreads and stuff. I guess Peter Schmeichel kind of started that, but back in the day when Greg and I were playing, it was, the slide, 2 hands to the ball, 1v1, or you reacted. But then we got into the blocks and the spreads and all of that. And really, the first keeper I saw do it common was much later than you actually, was Joe Hart, where it was like, that guy was throwing himself all over. So were you doing that when you were playing? Was that part of your training?
I don't believe I was not as much blocking for sure. I mean, I was certainly not afraid to put my chest through a ball and get into some stuff that was 50-50. But yeah, the way that it works now in the star and some of the stuff that Schmeichel is coming up with, some of the handball, things. It's been another one of those techniques in which I constantly find myself trying to, solve the riddle, right? Because the reality is you have to be brave. And I mean, a lot of young kids that people are trying to teach this to don't want to be hit by the ball. And so, like, how are you going to teach somebody to spread like Neuer or Ter Stegen or Berkey in St. Louis? Like, these guys are monsters, and they're certainly not scared of the ball. And so not only are they blocking, but they're also leaving themselves in a position where they're willing to react and stay into it. And I feel like there's sometimes where it's also kind of a default, like, well, I tried, right? Oh, I was there and I blocked. They just didn't hit me. And I'm like, no, but you have to stay engaged, and there still is a reaction, even beyond getting yourself in a good position.
Right.
And so, there's these things are continuing to evolve. I learned stuff from my keepers. They certainly each have different techniques that they use. But yeah, for me, I think that if you're not continuing to try to figure out these things, you're making a mistake. I mean, Schmeichel, obviously, the pressure that he was able to put shooters under was landmark, and it changed the game.
I'm terrified to train on the spread because kids pull muscles in their legs. Boom, like the Ter Stegen Neuer style. So you got to be a gymnast to do that stuff.
These guys are super athletes.
Yeah, man.
I mean, you see Neuer sweeping up everything within the opponent's side, inside of his half of the field. It's certainly unique, and it's not something that you're teaching to your 10 and 11-year-olds. You can maybe be introducing the topics, but I mean, you also think about it, like a lot of the top keepers, there was a phase where you went through tall, lanky goalkeepers, and that phase is passing pretty quickly, and you're seeing more and more robust goalkeepers that are able to deal with the pressures of being smashed by a ball from close range.
Yeah, very true.
Speaking of being smashed by a ball at close range, or having a ball smashed at you, last night in your game against Austin FC, the second goal that was given up, I actually had one of my U11 players ask me if I saw it. Do you mind talking about that one? Like,
talking through the goal?
Yeah, talking through that goal.
I'm not sure I have all the facts on it.
Okay, no, it's fine. It's fine if not. Like, because I watched it, and I watched it over and over again, and I thought that John went out and made a good play at it, and then it was just smack. Like, it was so fast. Like, it was almost like a split second. It was past him, and I was like, how does he even see that ball? So
yeah, I mean, it's also about the height, right? Like, how far down the line do you really need to come if the angle's there, right? And I can't really talk about it. I was planning on watching the game again. I mean, I've seen it, but cool. I certainly have multiple angles, and so
you have more angles than what I have, obviously.
Yeah, we have more angles than anybody needs for one soccer game. But it's certainly a great finish from Aubryon, right? And you just wonder, like, how does the height affect you, right? If you're brave and you come down the line, then you give up some of that time that you had to deal with the shot and your ability to get laterally to the shot. You kill the angle, but if you sit, maybe you have time. I'll probably end up talking to John about it tomorrow, so I need to make sure that I'm prepared. But yeah, it's certainly a good finish. He's been fantastic for us. John's somebody that has come in with a real character, and we're a team that needs that. We're a team that needs guys that have, an undying belief in themselves and a commitment to win. And he's a competitive guy, and he's fiery, a guy straight out of Philly, which is great. And I've enjoyed working with him. He's come up with some really big saves for us. He's really clear what he wants. I felt like Bondi was somebody that really wanted to play out of the back, and he was patient with it. And there were times where our pivots just wouldn't show up, and then he's the one that's kind of caught waiting for options and maybe doesn't look as sharp as he should with the distribution because, the team doesn't necessarily function like a well-oiled machine. And so, J-Mac doesn't have that issue. He's not afraid to smash it and be done with it and worry about what else is going on later. But it's certainly a balance between two characters. But I enjoyed working with both of them in the last number of months.
Let's talk a little bit about your experience with the U.S. Open Cup. Obviously, 2 times you've won it. What do you remember about it? And maybe a little controversy here. What do you think the pathway is to having this tournament a success, especially with what I think MLS is sort of given a little punch here recently by not allowing some of the teams to play.
Yeah, I mean, I'm obviously somebody that is for the U.S. Open Cup in all of its glory. I'm also somebody that is the academy director. I saw the business side of the sport, and so understand all the dynamics of that and the amount of money that's involved. But I'd love to see us involved. I would have loved to have seen us involved this year. I feel like they're still trying to work through exactly where MLS Next stands within it, and how that everyone can be involved in this thing in an effective manner. But yeah, I would say that, some of, my favorite experiences, obviously we won the double in 2005. I still remember Alexi Lawless scoring a goal and running up the bowl at Cal State Fullerton was a wonderful memory for me. Just the venues, the competition that we played against, it's unique. Anytime that you're in a cup draw, anything can happen. People throwing the kitchen sink at you late into the match. But I also am somebody that wants to see the success of soccer in the United States and understand the importance of the competition in terms of getting different leagues or different players looks. And for us, like for MLS Next, like, it's important for those guys. Like, they missed out this year of Ventura County FC when they crashed out right before they got to play against USL teams. I mean, from a development perspective, it's just a huge asset for us. And I hope that everybody gets this thing settled in a way soon that allows for everyone to be involved, and it's at a level that's conducive to players making a living while also not burning themselves out.
Yeah, and talk a little bit about the international scene here. You had 6 national caps. I remember it was just a very clouded time for you in goalkeeping at that point. What do you remember about, for instance, your first international cap against Jamaica, and walk us through that experience?
My experiences with the national team are really interesting because I always use this as an example of young players and making sure that your goals and your aspirations are such that you don't put yourself in the lurch. And I don't think I ever really thought too much about playing with the national team. I just felt like it was kind of beyond what I was thinking about. And I was thinking about playing professional soccer and making a living at soccer, and I didn't really spend a lot of time on international soccer. I felt like I was probably going to have to go to Europe and play. So you just have this vision of what it's going to look like. And for me, my vision was not necessarily about playing in the World Cup. I don't know if I just didn't believe I could pull that off, or I overlooked it, or what, but I started getting national team calls probably in like 98, 99. And, I was in probably as many national team camps as any human could be in, but I was always like the third. And so I would never really make the rosters. And I played in 6 games. I never feel like I really flourished in the environment. But I was appreciative of the opportunities that I got, and was playing at a time when Casey and Brad were crushing it in the EPL, and Tim Howard was playing at Man United. He came through, and so I was always kind of just on the periphery of it. And I feel like maybe I was a little bit neglectful about having bigger aspirations within that space.
Yeah. Fairness to you, Kev, you're talking about arguably our three best keepers ever, right there. You know,
Yeah.
It'd be an interesting conversation to go through and rate them, blah blah blah. But if those guys aren't top three, they're definitely top five, in my opinion. That was the golden age of American goalkeeping, right there. So.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said, Pat. And I do remember how clouded it was, which is a good segue, because in '99 you're the MLS Goalkeeper of the Year, and Adidas is trying to do some promotions and do some technology within their company for products, and they introduced this finger save, and you seem to be the poster boy back then for them. Obviously, one of the first questions: did you actually wear the finger save? And what did you think of it, back then? And obviously, it's a spine in a glove. What was your reaction to all this?
Yeah, I did wear it. I believe I wore it probably for a year or two. I remember wearing the black and the white, the original. Then they had kind of transformed that into having like a fluorescent yellow back. That I kind of went through that process. But I think I eventually I stuck with this yellow glove that I fell in love with, yellow and black glove that Adidas put out, and it was really basic, but man, the latex was fantastic, and so I was using that for a while. I mean, I think the biggest thing for me with the finger saves was that I felt like sometimes when the ball was hit hard enough, that almost like there was an impact on the back of my hand from the finger saves. And so while I feel like it might have supported, I also felt it didn't necessarily feel as natural to me as somebody that had played without them originally. So maybe if I had, grown up with those, it might have been able to assist me in kind of in helping prevent finger injuries. God knows I've had enough of them. But I think I was also wearing the tunic. Do you remember the tunic glove?
Yes, I do. That lasted
the
about
tunic glove. Yeah, I got to be a part of all like the launches, so I could unzip the latex on my palm. But they actually made me one that was sewn, so it didn't really zip off. But it was a pretty interesting time for goalkeeping equipment.
Yeah. So when you retired, you got into TV, the color analyst with FC Dallas. What made you want to go that direction as opposed to jumping right into coaching, which obviously you're in now?
Yeah, I struggled to get back into coaching, and I don't really know why. I don't know why I was so like intent on staying away from it. I don't know if I thought that. Maybe I didn't want to have the same schedule that I'd had for the past, 25, 30 years. I didn't know if I was sick of eating the chicken in hotels and spaghetti and just the same routine. But like I said, I was passionate about the game. And so when the opportunity came up to commentate, I jumped at it. It's something as a kid growing up, whether it was listening to the commentators on tour or the greatest goals VHS tapes that we used to have. I was enamored with the way that people that spoke over the games were able to really add or take away from it, and I think that's a really powerful thing. And so, it's a per game type thing, And so for me, like I was looking for something that was going to pay the bills. And so I was fortunate, that the Hunts allowed me to do some games there for FC Dallas. I did it a little bit with Orlando originally when they came into the league, and I've done it a little bit with the LA Galaxy. So I certainly have some experience with it and have enjoyed it, but it wasn't a salaried position, and I really needed to find something that was going to cover my healthcare costs for my girls.
Yeah. So, I think hang on here, Pat, because this is pretty interesting. You end up being a MLS player union rep for 14 years. My question is, why the hell did you do this for so long? I mean, is it because no one wanted to do it and you're like, hell, I'll just keep doing it? And, what was it like representing the players, especially you went through a lot of changes in those 14 years in the MLS?
Yeah, I think it's important to try to make positive changes for the players and to help the league to grow. And I feel like the union has a lot to do with that. And so I certainly wanted to make sure that I was involved with that. I feel like it has a lot of impact on the game. And so for me, that was important. I also, when I was in Kansas City, I finished out my contract, and you said something about how I'd been traded from Kansas City to FC Dallas, and I kind of giggled when you said it because they were more than willing to just hold my contract and let me be done. And so fortunately, between my agent and myself, we were able to talk to FC Dallas, and I don't even know what we had to give Kansas City, but at that point, you could effectively force a player into retirement. And so it's now you talk about the reentry draft and you have all these different options if people aren't willing to exercise it. But there was a point where, they had the upper hand and they could control your career and they could say, well, there's an open market out there. If you don't want to, play in our league, you can certainly go anywhere else. And, fortunately, they don't have that ability anymore because of some of the moves that have happened within Major League Soccer, and the union has certainly been instrumental in changing that through some of the collective bargaining agreements.
Yeah. Pat, what were you going to say there? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
It's back to the commentary, just a random side note here. Martin Tyler is still commentating. I heard him on yesterday. I couldn't believe it. I was like, that's Martin Tyler. What is that guy? He's got to be in his 80s. How old is he, Ryan? You're the quick answer guy there. But he's still commentating, yeah?
He was born in 1945. He is 78 years old.
Okay.
And my kids know who he is thanks to FIFA.
He sounds as good as ever, too. It's like that when I was a kid in the 70s, he was commentating, and it's like he sounds the same today. It's wonderful. Brings me back. It's like an old song. Anyway.
Well, it was funny because when I finished playing, I knew that there was never going to be anything that I was going to want to do that I was going to love as much as I love playing soccer. And certainly I wanted to kind of dabble in all these different things. When you talk about the commentary, I was so impressed with the people that I got to work with. I worked with Mark Followill down at FC Dallas. And if you know Mark also works for the Dallas Mavericks. And this guy knows more about sports than I could ever hope to know. And I think Taylor Twellman's a little bit of a sports junkie as well. So, but I just remember Mark would be like, oh yeah, you remember this happened last May on that game we did on Wednesday against St. Louis away. And I'm like, what? I don't remember any of this. It's probably the concussions, but gee whiz, I felt bad that this guy was so much quicker on the uptake than I was.
I blame concussions on everything. It's concussions. I hit the goalpost too many times when I was a kid, that kind of thing. So,
all right. So, sometimes on the show we have some authors, and again, we have one. So, Pat, I don't know if you knew this. He's the author of a book called Boots Saves the Day. It's a children's book. Not that we're here to promote things like that, but in this case, we will. So, Kevin, tell us, what makes you one day wake up and say, I'm going to write a book, and it's going to be a children's book. And it's, like I say, it's been out for about 16 years. So tell us a little bit about this and, the journey to write this book.
Well, I'm not real sure you could actually find this book in print anywhere. But my wife and I, before we had my first daughter, she's a graphic designer. So we had decided that we were going to try to work on a little project together. And I was doing a lot of appearances in which I would go out, like maybe it was Read Across America. And I found myself reading from Dr. Seuss books and the like, and certainly appreciate them. But it wasn't necessarily, oh, you got it. Wow. Ryan must be crushing it.
He does.
So we put together this book, and the book's, about a cat, and the cat goes out to play soccer within the group, and they keep calling handball on him because he's using his front paws, and so then he becomes a goalkeeper, and It's a cute little story, just something that my wife and I did so that we could share it with our daughter when she was born, and gave me the opportunity to read on those Read Across America events. And we sold a couple and did some events in Kansas City when I was there, and it was certainly a good memory for me. And I'm happy that the book exists somewhere out there, that we were able to find it. But there's not a lot of copies out there, that's for sure.
It's available to order as an ebook on blurb.com if anybody wants to pick it up there. $10.99.
I wonder, there must be an account somewhere that's loaded up.
Yeah, you gotta find it. And then it's also available on their website to order in print.
You know, and Kevin was very humble with mentioning his wife, who's a graphic designer. Not only is she a graphic designer, guys, she's a Emmy graphic designer. And you're like, what? Yeah, so she was, she played a very important role in the K Zone for baseball on ESPN back in the day. I think it was 2000 or 2001, where she designed that. So hats off to her, a little shout out to her. I'm sure she'll be listening to this. So a lot of people didn't know that, and a lot of people don't know we go down those rabbit holes, Kevin, to find this type of information.
Yeah, you guys, I mean, that is, it's a miracle, the amount of research you guys did. But I will tell you this, every time that I have won any accolade in my life, she just brings her Emmy and literally like crushes whatever my trophy is. You're like, oh, goalkeeper of the CONCACAF tournament. She's like, Emmy. Like,
she just wants to remind you.
Yeah.
Just in case you forgot.
She's the boss.
So I know the answer, but Kevin, I'd like you to share, the best player you played against, maybe, and we'll break it into two phases, maybe, A, in your career, and then maybe in the MLS.
In my career, I had the opportunity to play against Zidane in 2005, I believe, when the Galacticos came over to play against the LA Galaxy in Carson. And I was just, first of all, he's well known for his level, but to play against him and to see this up close and personal was certainly amazing. It was interesting to me just how willing his teammates, I mean, guys like Roberto Carlos and Michael Owen and the like, would pass him the ball when they were wide open, and he would have three guys on his back just because they knew that he was going to be able to orchestrate play. And so to see that type of reverence from such high caliber players was pretty cool. And so I would say that he was probably the top player that I've ever played against as a player. In the MLS, God, Echeverry was nasty. I don't know. Marco Echeverry was a player that, would be dribbling across the midfield like 40 yards from goal, and I was like, oh, he's going to shoot this. Oh, he's going to shoot this. Just because he was able to do amazing things, and he was able to he was intimidating to play against, man. I don't know if it was just me at that point or whatever, like in my development, that I hadn't had the number of experiences that I need to be able to get my little grab a few yards here or a few yards there. But he was somebody that at that point in my career, I would say that I was intimidated playing against.
Yeah, pretty interesting. Pat, I'm going to give it to you here if you had some questions for Kevin.
No, I've just been kind of throwing them in all along. We certainly appreciate your insights, and it's been a heck of a career, obviously, and we're flattered and honored to have had you on the show, man. Greg, you steer the ship. I add color every now and then, and right now I'm at a loss. I've gotten what I needed in there, and Kevin's covered the bases for sure.
Yeah, Ryan, do you want to add anything there?
The only question I still have left is how important is the LA Galaxy Sports Science Department on what you do on a daily basis with your keepers? You guys have on the website, they're one of the only clubs that really pushes like how important the sports medicine and the recovery and cognitive performance and all of those things. Like, how important is that for you as a coach to have that resource?
Yeah, I think, for me, it's always been something that I think goalkeeper coaches dabble in a little bit in terms of, trying to figure out where cognitive development kind of fits in within, their training program. And that could be vision training. It could be, awareness. And I'm fortunate to have the ability to put the guys into some of the synaptic trainings, and we have different things that we do to understand exactly how their near far sight, their reaction time. I can get real time information on that, and so we can kind of update it based off of their improvements. And then on the sports science, like the physical side, it allows me to kind of actively track exactly how heavily the load is, and exactly where the guys are in terms of their recuperation. And if there's anything that really stands out, they always reach out to me and kind of let me know what adjustments that might be beneficial. But I've relished being able to have that as an asset within the toolbox to be able to help the guys out as much as I can. And they're certainly willing to, provide their expertise if I have any questions about the goalkeeping side of things. And maybe, some of those guys have been at it at the professional level for a really long time, and they can talk to me about how maybe things have evolved since, I was playing. Or, I mean, the head of our performance department is the same guy that ran me for like 10 miles and then took me up to a mountain and made me run for like 25 minutes. And I'm like, where was this science when I was playing? So I didn't have to do all this crap. And he's like,
you didn't have
things
rest
have
and
changed.
recovery
And I'm
when you
like,
played, right?
Okay, of course. Just came along at the wrong time, right?
Are you training any kids, Kevin, or are you just doing the top?
I have two family friends that I maybe train once a week, and that's about it. I work with the youth within the club sometimes. I mean, we'll try to bring some of the kids from either within the academy or from the second team up when the opportunity presents itself with our first team, just so that I can kind of keep an eye on some of the players that are coming through the club, and I have them for information in case we have to make any decisions about what their next steps might be, but not necessarily away from the club. No.
So let me ask you this. I may sound a bit like a caveman here, but to me, learning technique becomes something where you break down the keeper physically, so that it's a mental fatigue you create, and then you have them perform the technique. Because throwing a top hand, etc., very few people naturally do that. It becomes something you teach where it's instinctive and reactionary. So outside of my method of this breakdown physically, now you do it. Any suggestions there? Anything that you might have some insight on?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting because, I'm seeing these guys every day, more or less. And so just trying to figure out exactly where you can fit the work in a way that it allows them to recuperate fully for either a Wednesday or Saturday game. And so we usually train we'll usually do something either speed and acceleration related, maybe recovering to feet, game day -4. Game day -3 is usually a volume day for us, so the guys are working over big spaces, and that sometimes becomes like a sweeping type of training. Then our game day -2 would become something that would be more plyometric based. But I agree with you in terms of like what that workload looks like. I feel like sometimes if they're in a fatigued state, it's as close as you can get to what pressure looks like in a game. And so whether that is increased service, whether that's an uncomfortability of being out of position and the recovery towards that, there's a number of different ways that we're looking to put them into states that appear more natural to what they're seeing in game. It can't just all be easy, that's for sure.
Yeah. No, I mean, the question, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear enough, but no, that was great to hear what you're doing. That was interesting. But I'm talking about like a 14, 15-year-old kid that you're really trying to technically hone. And it's just hard work. Is there another way that
No,
I don't know.
it's repetition, right?
No,
Yeah.
it's repetition. Yeah,
That's
totally.
what I'm thinking. Okay.
Yeah.
It's repetition,
absolutely.
but I mean, any if you're going to become a master of something, I don't think there's a way to master it without repetition. But I think you can be efficient with that mastery, right? Like I feel like video feedback is relevant, and having players see themselves is relevant. They can hear you say you have to get your elbows closer together when you go into this frontal so the ball doesn't slip through. But until they see it with their own two eyes, they might not even realize that they're doing it. So there are certainly times that we're filming the players and providing feedback, and we'll meet with them and kind of sit down and show them exactly some of the things that they need to consider. But I'm working with professionals, and these guys have techniques, and some of them are 32 years old. So I don't really think I'm going to change too much about exactly where they are. But I think as a club, it's important for us to have a consortium of ideas that are united, so that we can make sure that we're generally giving the same feedback towards what it is that we're trying to accomplish. The last thing I want to do is go out and hear something on the U17s field that is totally against something that I believe in. And so more often than not, I'm fortunate that I work with both Ian Foyer and Jonathan Lamelli, are two guys that, have seen the game and are great educators and people that I feel like we have a lot of shared ideas, and, so that the players are getting consistent messaging as they come through the academy.
Are they working with the Ventura County MLS Next guys, or are they?
Yeah, so currently Brady Scott's been playing all of the Ventura County games, and he has been with me most days, and then usually goes in with Ventura County the day of the game. But so far, every game that Ventura County has played has been at our stadium, and they train every day at our stadium. So we haven't necessarily seen too much of the Ventura County side of things yet, but I'm sure that will evolve in the coming months. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kevin Hartman, for joining us. It's been a pleasure. A lot of information. Pat, you want to add anything? Ryan, you want to add anything here?
Just sorry EV couldn't be here, but thanks for hanging out with us. And, I got a lot out of talking to you. It was great.
All right,
Thank you.
I appreciate you guys having me. Certainly a pleasure to get together and talk about goalkeeping away from the office, and to get some different insight. It's always intriguing to talk with a goalkeeping crowd versus the coaching staff in terms of their perception of how I'm included in the conversations versus how I get included when we talk with a bunch of other goalkeepers. I like that.
All right.
Really appreciate you coming on. It's
all right.
I was super excited to have you on, and I'm so glad that we were able to figure out a time, and appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule to join us for sure.
Of course, it's my pleasure. When EV's back around and you guys are 6 months down the road, feel free to give me a call and we can catch up about something new.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys.
Yep. See ya.
See you, man.
Thanks for watching and listening to the Three Old Goalies Podcast. Be sure to follow us on your favorite podcast platform or subscribe to our YouTube channel. Three Old Goalies is available on Instagram and on Twitter. Can't get enough? Check us out on www.threeoldgoalies.com.